one. So it's a little unfair. You know, you win a war, but they have no right to be doing what they're doing.
Let's talk about the Iran negotiations and maybe what went wrong in Islamabad. Joining us now, Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
What happened, and where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, Brett, I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think things went right. We made a lot of progress, but we also made very clear, and I think this is part of the progress we made, what the terms where the United States could make some accommodation, what terms we were flexible on, and what things we absolutely needed to see in order for the President of the United States to feel like he was getting a good deal. And so we laid those things out. We had some good conversations. I think it was the first time that you had ever seen the Iranian government, the U.S. government meet at such a high level, maybe in the history of the current leadership of Iran. So that's, I think, a positive. And again, we did make some progress in the negotiation. The big question from here on out is whether the Iranians will have enough flexibility, whether the Iranians will accept the critical things that we need to see.
Nearly 900 U.S. and Israeli airstrikes hit Iran in 12 hours. Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, the man who had ruled the Islamic Republic for 35 years, was killed in the first wave of strikes on his compound in Tehran. His wife, his family members, his defense minister, his IRGC commander, his top intelligence officials, all gone in one morning. That was 46 days ago. Today, the United States Navy has completely sealed Iran's ports. Every ship attempting to leave Iranian waters is being intercepted and turned back. Iran's entire seaborne economy, 90% of everything it imports and exports, has been halted. According to U.S. Central Command, it took 36 hours. The cost to Iran is $435 million per day, and not a single shot has been fired. 6 weeks ago, none of this was thinkable. Today, all of it is real. This video is the story of how the world got from there to here in 46 days, what it means, why it matters, and what is coming next. To understand how extraordinary the current moment is, you need to understand exactly what was happening 48 hours before it began. On February 26th and 27th, U.S. and Iranian diplomats were in Geneva for what multiple sources described as the most substantive nuclear negotiating session in years. Oman's foreign minister, who was mediating, said publicly that a deal was within reach. Iran's delegation was described as engaged and serious. The U.S. team was cautiously optimistic. Then, according to reporting from multiple outlets including NPR and Britannica, on February 27th at 8:38 p.m. Eastern Time, while aboard Air Force One flying to Texas, President Trump gave the order to proceed with Operation Epic Fury. The diplomats in Geneva were still talking. The next morning, according to Britannica's verified account, U.S. and Israeli forces launched nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours. The targets were Iran's missile systems, air defenses, military infrastructure, and critically, its leadership. The attack was timed specifically, according to U.S. and Israeli officials, around intelligence that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei would be attending a meeting at his compound with senior officials. According to Wikipedia's verified account of the assassination, the CIA had been tracking Khamenei's movements for months and learned of the meeting in advance. The strikes were planned to coincide with it. By the afternoon of February 28th, Iran's supreme leader was dead. His defense minister was dead. The IRGC commander was dead. The head of military intelligence was dead. Iran's parliament building was struck. Its state broadcaster headquarters was destroyed. Its air defense radar network was largely disabled. In one morning, the United States and Israel attempted what no country had done to a major regional power in modern history: the simultaneous decapitation of an entire government. 6 weeks ago, that was unthinkable. Iran's response began within hours, and it was enormous. According to the 2026 Iran war timeline on Wikipedia, Iran launched hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles at Israel and U.S. military bases across the region. Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all hit simultaneously. The Pentagon confirmed the loss of at least 15 U.S. soldiers and damage to 17 military sites. Iran also fired over 100 ballistic missiles at the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier. Trump later said all of them were intercepted. A U.S. submarine sank an Iranian Navy frigate south of Sri Lanka. U.S. embassies in Dubai and Riyadh were struck by Iranian drones. Kuwait's international airport was attacked, and then Iran did something that none of the U.S. war planners had publicly accounted for with sufficient weight. It closed the Strait of Hormuz, not a partial closure. A complete shutdown to all vessels from countries it deemed hostile, which meant most of the world's commercial shipping. The IRGC laid mines across the standard shipping lane. It positioned fast attack boats. It warned that any vessel attempting transit without permission would be targeted. According to Britannica, before this war, 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade and 20% of global LNG passed through Hormuz daily. That traffic effectively stopped on day one 6 weeks ago. A closed Strait of Hormuz for more than a few days was considered one of the most catastrophic scenarios in global energy market planning. By February 28th, it was reality. Between February 28th and today, 7 things happened that, taken individually, each would have been considered impossible 6 weeks ago. Together, they represent the most dramatic reshaping of Middle Eastern power dynamics since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Number 1. Iran's supreme leader was killed in an airstrike. Khamenei had ruled Iran for 35 years. He was the most powerful figure in the Islamic Republic, above the president, above the parliament, above every institution. Israel had reportedly considered assassinating him during the June 2025 12-day war, and the operation was vetoed by Trump. This time, according to Wikipedia, it was not. Number 2. Iran fired 101 missiles at a U.S. aircraft carrier and none hit. Trump confirmed this number publicly. The USS Abraham Lincoln's combined defense system, including Aegis, SM-3 interceptors, and CIWS, stopped every one. The psychological message of that failure to Iranian military planners cannot be overstated. Number 3. The Strait of Hormuz closed for 46 consecutive days. The previous record for a major Hormuz disruption was measured in hours. This closure has now stretched nearly 7 weeks and produced the largest oil supply shock, according to the IEA, in recorded history. Number 4. Oil crossed $111 per barrel, then dropped on ceasefire news, then surged again. Before this war, oil was approximately $70 per barrel. It crossed $111 at the height of the fighting, a 58% increase. The volatility has produced what Bloomberg described as the largest single monthly gain in oil prices ever recorded in March 2026. Number 5. The first direct U.S.-Iran talks in 47 years happened in Islamabad. Not since the Carter administration, not since the hostage crisis, never at this level of seniority. J.D. Vance and Iranian Parliament Speaker Kalibaf in the same room for 21 hours. Number 6. The U.S. launched a naval blockade sealing Iran's entire economy. According to CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, in less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, U.S. forces completely halted all economic trade going into and out of Iran by sea. $435 million per day. No shots fired. If the U.S. blockade continues, Iran's military has now threatened to extend disruptions to Red Sea shipping, a second global choke point through which 12% of world trade normally flows. According to Al Jazeera reporting this week, that threat is active and on the table. 7 milestones, 46 days, every single one was unthinkable on February 27th. The naval blockade that is now strangling Iran's economy deserves a precise explanation because the way it works is genuinely unprecedented. Most people imagine a naval blockade as warships parked across a waterway, guns pointed outward. That is not what is happening. A U.S. military official described the strategy to reporters this week in 4 words. Our net is the Gulf of Oman. The U.S. warships are not inside the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran has laid mines, positioned fast attack boats, and placed shore-based missiles. They are on the other side of the strait in deep open water, waiting. Any Iranian ship that leaves port must transit the strait to reach international markets. Once it clears the strait and enters the Gulf of Oman, U.S. destroyers are there. The Institute for the Study of War published an assessment this week stating that the blockade has no defined geographic boundary, meaning the U.S. can interdict Iran-bound vessels almost anywhere in international waters until they reach their final port. A former U.S. Navy captain told CNN, and this detail is extraordinary, a fully loaded oil tanker moves at under 20 miles per hour, barely faster than a bicycle. The U.S. Navy can track it anywhere in the world. Blockade has no borders. According to NBC News, in the first 48 hours, 9 vessels were ordered to turn back. 5 were carrying oil. 2 reversed course within the first 2 hours of the blockade going live. No shots were fired. U.S. personnel did not board a single ship. The ships turned around on radio instruction alone, and the scale of enforcement is staggering. According to CENTCOM, more than 10,000 U.S. sailors, Marines, and Air Force personnel are involved, over 100 fighter and surveillance aircraft, more than a dozen warships, all positioned in the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. The result, according to Admiral Brad Cooper's official CENTCOM statement, Iran's seaborne trade, which powers 90% of its economy, is completely halted. 6 weeks ago, America blockading Iran's entire economy without firing a shot was unthinkable. While the blockade operates above water, Iran is not simply absorbing the pressure passively. Satellite imagery reviewed by CNN this week revealed something that has received almost no mainstream coverage, but is directly relevant to everything that happens next. At multiple Iranian underground missile bases, known in military circles as missile cities, front-end loaders are scooping rubble from blocked tunnel entrances and loading it into dump trucks. The same tunnel entrances that U.S. and Israeli bombing runs deliberately collapsed during the fighting, to trap missile launchers inside and prevent them from firing or reloading, are being systematically unblocked. A researcher at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies explained the logic precisely. This aligns with the overall concept of operations for the missile city, which was, you eat the first attack, dig yourself out, and then launch again. U.S. intelligence, according to CNN sources, assessed that roughly half of Iran's missile launchers survived the first month of fighting. Many are buried under rubble that is now being removed. Every day of ceasefire that Iran uses to free a missile launcher is a day that shifts the military balance if war resumes, and Iran is using every one. On top of the missile excavation, Iran's military this week issued a new formal threat. If the U.S. blockade continues, Iran will begin disrupting shipping in the Red Sea through which the Suez Canal connects, 12% of all global trade. A second choke point, a second weapon Iran is telling the world it is prepared to use. The ceasefire was supposed to create space for diplomacy. According to the satellite imagery and Iran's own military statements, it is also creating space for rearmament. The rest of the world has been watching 46 days of the unthinkable unfold, and the reactions have been as revealing as the events themselves. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer refused to join the U.S. blockade, telling the BBC directly, "We are not supporting the blockade." The United Kingdom is not getting dragged in. Then simultaneously, his Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper convened a 40-nation virtual summit to address Iran's original Hormuz closure, saying Iran had, quote, hijacked an international shipping route to hold the global economy hostage. Britain, simultaneously against the U.S. blockade and against Iran's blockade, threading an impossible needle because Britain is dependent on Middle Eastern energy in a way that America, as an oil exporter, simply is not. France's Macron said opening Hormuz by military force was unrealistic. Spain called the blockade something that makes no sense. China called it dangerous and irresponsible. Qatar demanded the immediate resumption of maritime activity. The IMF this week cut its global growth forecast to 3.1% for 2026, warning the world was drifting toward what it called an adverse scenario. It projected a 6.1% economic contraction for Iran specifically. The IEA said oil demand is falling at the steepest rate since COVID. Bloomberg confirmed the largest monthly oil price gain ever recorded happened in March 2026, and Trump's message to all of it? He told European nations this week to, quote, start learning how to fight for yourselves. He told them the hard part is done. He reminded them that America exports oil and does not need Hormuz the way they do. He suggested they go get their own oil. That statement, more than any airstrike, represents the most dramatic shift in America's relationship with its allies since the Second World War. A U.S. president publicly telling NATO partners that America's strategic interests and their strategic interests are no longer the same thing. 6 weeks ago, that was unthinkable. Every one of the unthinkable things this video has described, the decapitation strike, the missile war, the Hormuz closure, the 21-hour talks, the naval blockade, all of it is now converging on a single 6-day window. The ceasefire expires April 21st. Here is what the next 6 days could produce. According to verified reporting from CNN, the Associated Press, Bloomberg, and multiple diplomatic sources, 3 scenarios are on the table. Scenario 1, a deal. Pakistan's army chief personally flew to Tehran this week carrying a message from Washington. Trump told the New York Post, calling them back 30 minutes after an initial interview, something could be happening over the next 2 days and we're more inclined to go to Islamabad. He told ABC News, "I think you're going to be watching an amazing 2 days ahead. If Iran returns to Islamabad with genuine closing authority, and the nuclear pause gap between 20 years and 5 years can be bridged, a deal is possible. The blockade eases, oil falls, gas prices drop. The world exhales. If a full deal cannot be reached but both sides want more time, the ceasefire gets extended beyond April 21st. The blockade continues as pressure. Talks resume. The world stays in suspension. Expensive, uncertain, but not at war. Bombing resumes. Oil crosses $120 per barrel. U.S. gas hits $5, $50 to $6. Iran activates the Red Sea threat. A second choke point closes. China accelerates weapons deliveries to Iran. The 82nd Airborne, already deploying, enters the picture. The draft registration that was announced this week for American men becomes something more than a formality. The Council on Foreign Relations put the dilemma plainly this week. The blockade is the correct long-game tool for forcing Iran's compliance. But long games take months. The ceasefire takes days. Trump's calculation must produce a result before April 21st, or he faces a choice between abandoning the blockade or resuming a war he has described as very close to over. Here is where we began this video and where we end it. On February 27, 2026, U.S. and Iranian diplomats were in Geneva. A deal, mediators said, was within reach. The world oil price was $70 a barrel. Iran's supreme leader was alive. The Strait of Hormuz was open. American men did not have draft registration letters arriving at their doors. Nobody was paying $4, $13 for a gallon of gasoline. On April 15, 2026, Iran's supreme leader has been dead for 46 days. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed for 46 days. U.S. and Iranian officials met face-to-face for the first time since 1979 and left without a deal. The United States Navy has sealed Iran's entire seaborne economy with a naval force of 10,000 personnel and over 100 aircraft. Not a single shot has been fired at a ship. Oil is at $100 a barrel. Gas is at $4, $13 and climbing. And the ceasefire expires in 6 days. Every single one of those facts, taken individually, would have been called impossible on February 27th. Together, they describe a world that changed faster than anyone's framework was prepared to process. Trump told Fox Business this week that the war with Iran is, quote, very close to over. Iran's foreign ministry says its 10-point peace plan stands unchanged and some U.S. demands remain, quote, unreasonable and unrealistic. Pakistan's army chief is in Tehran right now with a message from Washington. What happens in the next 6 days will either validate the most audacious military and diplomatic gamble in a generation, or it will show that the unthinkable things that already happened were only the beginning of a longer and darker story. 6 weeks ago, none of this was thinkable.